Welcome to Conversations with Jackie and Bobby. I'm Bobby Angel, one of your hosts, and today I have the pleasure of getting to talk with Mary O'Regan, who wrote a great book on Padre Pio, and we're going to talk about him predominantly. But Mary, I want to say, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you very, very much for the honor of having me, Bobby.
You are an Irish girl living in LA.
Yes, originally I'm from County Cork, Ireland, where I was born and raised. And I live now in Los Angeles, and I've lived here full time for 6 years.
I did a study abroad in Ireland in for my college university studies. It had absolutely nothing to do with my major. It was a music class. It was a traditional music festival in County Clare. The
This June Varna?
yes, the no the Willie Clancy music festival, and it was great. And I traveled all around. I spent a little bit of time in Cork, but I love your home country.
Oh, Bobby, that's fantastic to hear.
So, would you mind sharing a little bit about your story? How did you end up in LA? And you are a writer and been involved in different media. So, if you want to give the long version or the short version, we're here for it.
Well, actually, the first time I came to Los Angeles was to go to Orange County to produce a TV show on the vibrant Latin Mass scene in Orange County. So I actually came here to go to Jackie's hometown.
That's funny.
And it is a vibrant scene down there. And the Latin Mass communities in Orange County and around Los Angeles are very, very strong because the culture is so against us that there is a kind of binding together of the Latin Mass Catholics and of Catholics in general. You've got very strong parishes all over here, thank God. And I came here to produce a TV show that went on EWTN called Extraordinary Faith. And that was 12 years ago. And I then got a job as an editor for someone who had been a Hollywood lawyer, John Carmichael, and I edited his book Drunks and Monks. And growing up in Ireland was the perfect experience for editing a book called Drunks and Monks.
Oh, you're primed for it.
Yeah, you're primed for it. So I did that. That went on Amazon, and it got favorable reviews. And it just, from the time I was in my late 20s, my life was, it was like a hotel wall, like the two clocks that are up on the wall. You've got England and Ireland on one side, and you've got the LA time on the other. So my brain was like programmed for Los Angeles, London, because I was a journalist in London at the time, that I was preparing to come to Orange County to do the TV show. But then I became very, very close with the Latin Mass Catholics in Orange County. And then I kept living kind of both clocks at the same time. London during the day, Los Angeles at night. And then I just followed a call 6 years ago to come here to Los Angeles and live here permanently. But it took me 8 years to write the book on Padre Pio. And it was a call I kind of somehow resisted to do this book on Padre Pio. Maybe I wasn't spiritually ready to do it. So I'm 41 now. I started the book when I was 32. So it was, when I was growing up, I wasn't very well catechized. I had very, very poor formation in school. I don't mean to be uncharitable. It's just the truth. And there were various mystical things that were happening to me that I couldn't explain or understand. Something that is not in the book, but which I've put on my personal blog, The Pathless Taken, or Mary's blog, I just call it Mary's blog, is that, when I was 4, there was an apparition of the devil towards me and of his minions around me. It's very unusual for that to happen, but it did also happen to Padre Pio, but it happened to him when he was in the womb. Padre Pio was harassed by the devil when he was in the womb and in his mother's womb. I mean, it's interesting that she was carrying a baby and the devil knew more about his capacity for heroic sanctity than his own mother. And that could be happening to many of the viewers. You could be carrying a child, or you could have a child who is destined for holiness. But there was an apparition of the devil when I was 4. And so I always believed in the devil, because I'd seen him. He actually pushed me, and I couldn't even look at him. I had to close my eyes. But I didn't understand this. So I went around at 4 asking. No one had told me you don't really usually catechize a child at age 4 as to who the devil is. You wait till a bit later. I think most parents would wait till a bit later. But I remember asking different people, is the devil after me? What does he want? And I got various reactions. And I had to go with the one that was, someone said to me, yes, the devil is after you. He will do everything to stop you. And another person said it's a fairy tale. And I had to go with the fairy tale option at that moment when I was 4, because it was the only thing that soothed me. It was a lie, obviously, but it was, but then later, so no faith in Christ until later. But when I was 14, I was inadvertently just on vacation in a living room, and someone mentioned that Padre Pio could bilocate. And we were watching a trashy 1970s pornographic horror film, and we just turned on the television and it was just there on, and it was about a psychic who could bilocate, who could be in 2 places at once. And it was so trashy that you can't find it anywhere on the internet. I've looked.
Well, thank God.
I've looked just to see if, I can see what it was about, and I can't find it. I don't know the name of it, nothing. But I do know now that it was set in Orange County.
Oh, dear.
Sorry. It's like, you know what I mean? I can see now. But, so you kind of have the light and the darkness coming out of California very, very much at this time. We might get to that later. But the minute that someone said, Padre Pio, that psychic can bilocate. Padre Pio could bilocate. He could be in 2 places at once and serve 2 separate people in 2 entirely different parts of the globe, or even in his home country of Italy. The minute that was said to me, he was just there in front of me. And he was in a cell, kind of like my little study here, 6 by 10. And I'll never forget it. He had these coffee-colored eyes, and he just penetrated me with this stare, and it was riveted me to the spot, and I just couldn't think of he was just there. And I knew he was a Franciscan because I'd seen Franciscan friars before. He was a Capuchin. He was wearing this lovely brown habit, and he had these carmine lips, and they were glowering at me. He wasn't very pleased with me at that moment in time, which I understand because I was 14, I was a teenager. My ambitions really were to get a boyfriend and to become either a nurse or a doctor. Maybe, I wanted to become a healthcare professional at that time. But he said something to me without moving his lips, because it was an interlocution, which I didn't understand at the time. It was kind of sort of confusing. He's talking to me, but he's not moving his lips, because in heaven they don't need to talk like we're talking. At least I don't know. But he said to me, I am waiting for you. But it had the words hung in smoke. They just impressed themselves on my mind. And I was thinking, for what? Like, why? And it was, and then he had these, I must say that he had these little brown gloves. I couldn't understand why he had these brown gloves, these little brown gloves that were fingerless. And then later, randomly, I was just in a house and I was looking at the books, and I just saw a biography of Padre Pio, picked it up, and there he was. Mm-hmm. The biography had the same picture, and I was like, this can't be imagination. The same person who appeared to me is the exact same person on the cover of this book. And I remember reading the book, and I remember reading the back of it, and I remember reading the sort of laundry list of charisms and mystical gifts that he had, and I just went completely over my head. All I could understand that he'd been born in Italy, that he'd had a ministry in the mountains, and I could only understand bilocation. And I remember thinking very exactly, I will never be able to read a biography about Padre Pio. This is beyond my IQ level. It made me feel very insecure because I just couldn't understand it. I said, I'll never be able to read this. Lo and behold, I write a book about him.
You said, I'll write my own book. So, how old were you again when that vision happened?
14.
14. At that point, was it then, okay, I need to take my faith seriously? Was that a switch that got thrown? Was it still a bit of a process?
It was a process because I thought it was imagination. Because people were always saying to me as a child, you have a very wild imagination. Because I don't know, different things happened to me as a child that were unusual and that were different. But then, when I was 15, I was struck by a truck.
Okay, so yeah, you share this in the book. This is wild. And we're going to get to Padre Pio and explain a little bit more about him, but I think this is so intertwined with your testimony and the experience sometimes of like this saint has chosen me. I didn't choose them. They're after me for some reason. And I have a similar experience with Padre Pio, also Saint Charbel, who's the Lebanese monk. But I want to hear your like what happened. You were hit by a truck. So let's go there next.
So I was hit by a truck that had these different trucks are different. So it was more like an old-fashioned truck that had a very high, it was very high. And I just, we take the bus all the time in Ireland, and I was taking the bus, walked around behind the back of the bus, walked into traffic because the bus was at an angle. I walked into traffic and was hit head on. I was thrown. And there was a huge amount of people who just got off the bus. So many people saw this. And I was just absorbed into a white space. And I was shown a corridor where my life was, how much life I had spent, where I was in life, and what was going to happen. Not everything. I mean, just a general outline. And I was just told, our Lord was there, His presence was there, and He said to me, "I'm returning you to Earth now, and for a little while, several decades, and in a while I will call you to me, but I will return you." And this was all telepathic. I will return you without one scratch, without one bruise. And this is simultaneously while this is happening, I was completely unconscious. I could hear everyone around me talking about what they felt was happening to me. One lady thought I'd committed suicide, and she was hysterical. Obviously, she had something, but I was simultaneously in the Great White, and I was simultaneously enjoying a great peace, and a great ecstasy. And that's the way I knew it was genuine, because I'd had no medical training. There's no way that I could have been struck completely and known that I would survive totally. I mean, without a sprain, without a bruise, nothing. And then the paramedics came and they took it very seriously. Went to the hospital. And if you've ever had an accident like this, two doctors come around because one has to do on either side. And a kind of a light came off the body. And it was unusual because Ireland. And the other thing that happened, it's taken me a number of years to understand this, but I was lying down in the muck when I was struck by the truck. And then they were surprised because the clothes had because Ireland, it rains all the time and the roads are muddy. Even in the city, the roads are muddy and mossy even. And there was no dirt on the clothes.
Wow.
So I knew then that Jesus was real. I'd resisted Jesus for a very long time, for a very, very long time. Really, it was a very strong rejection of Jesus, very, very strong rejection in my childhood. And then I knew He was real. And then I remember meeting a nun later, and she was in plain clothes. And I just remember knowing that I felt the sense of Jesus in her and that she'd received the Eucharist. And the same thing would happen when I'd meet someone who'd received the Eucharist. The same presence was as the same presence that I'd felt up there.
I mean, there's got to be, and looking back on it all now, a few decades later, has it just been this kind of a roller coaster sense of like, all right, Jesus, take me where you want me to go. Use my gifts, use my skills. Well, I got them.
No, there's been a lot of resistance. There's been a lot of like, I mean, it's only really, I think, in recent years that I've said, Lord, I'll give you my life.
Which is good to hear because sometimes we think, oh, if only I had some kind of miracle, if I only had something, well, then I could believe. Well, then I'd have perfect faith. And to know, no, it's still very much our own humanity and fears and resistance that can play a part in cooperating with God.
And still a lot of, like, from that time, there was a lot of ingratitude. And I was very careful, but it did give me a very, very strong sense of sin. And I remember making a few choices after being struck by the truck. I decided to stay chaste till marriage, not to drink till I was in my 20s, not to, just to try to be very, very careful of sin because I didn't want to miss out on that. And there was kind of the experience. I understood then why the Lord had allowed the devil to do that to me when I was 4, because I don't want to be in his clutches for all eternity. I want to be in that great white space. And it sounds selfish, but it is the motivation.
No, it's not. I mean, that's the union for which we are aching for. So let's switch to Padre Pio himself. So for anyone who's listening or watching that may have no clue, like what is a Padre Pio? Like when I had my conversion, I'm like, I don't know Divine Mercy, Chaplet, what's a Padre Pio? Like all this Catholic stuff that I had just kind of nodded along with for the first time actually digging into it. So you wrote a beautiful book on it, by the way. It's so it's so well researched. It's so detailed. Um, so go read the book. But for the sake of this podcast, who is Padre Pio?
Padre Pio is the second Saint Francis. So Saint Francis was a Franciscan. He founded the Franciscan order, and in Italy, and then he. This is something that people don't know about Saint Francis, but Saint Francis had the stigmata. He was given a winged seraph came and gave Saint Francis the stigmata. So the stigmata are the wounds of Christ. So Saint Francis was the original person who became Christ's self-portrait by way of bearing Jesus's wounds, the sacred stigmata.
So not self-inflicted.
No, and we can get to that in a moment if you like. But there was a prophecy made that there would be a second Saint Francis, and that he would bring a third of the world to Christ. And Saint Francis was in the 1200s. Padre Pio was born in the late 1800s, and he is the second Saint Francis. By where he became a Franciscan friar. He was a priest in his native Italy. He was born into a poor family, and they are juxtaposed because Saint Francis, the original Saint Francis, was born into great wealth. Great, great, great wealth. He had a French mother and an Italian father, and Saint Francis came from a life of great sin. He said, "I have been all things unholy." Juxtaposed to that is Padre Pio. Padre Pio was born into a poor family. So what was second nature to Padre Pio to go from a life of poverty go from a poor family? They didn't lack anything, but they didn't have anything. They didn't have anything to spare. Then he said we never lacked anything. But what was second nature to Padre Pio, the original Saint Francis had to give up all his wealth, all his inheritance. So there are differences. And Padre Pio is the second Saint Francis because he bore the stigmata too. Christ himself came and wounded Padre Pio with his wounds. And they're the sacred stigmata. And Padre Pio was alive not too long ago. He died in 1968, and he bore the stigmata for a total of 58 years. And the first 8 years he bore them in secret. He bore them invisibly to the eyes of people around him. And for the last 50 years, he bore them visibly. And he is the second St. Francis because he's the one who will lead a third of the world to Christ, I believe. And we know that he's born in modern times, and that is a great benefit to the faith because they can't be self-inflicted. We know that medically it's been proven over and over because I'm getting into the weeds here, Bobby, but I'm just going to go for it,
Go
if I
for
may.
it.
Go for it. Okay. So the stigmata, he was given them mystically, and people said during his lifetime that they were self-inflicted. In fact, a few people have said to me during the course of writing the book, you're writing the book, a few people said actually, including, well, you're writing a book about a self-mutilating psychopath. And we do have a situation in criminology, so I had to get into criminology when I was writing the book, where criminals actually use acid to destroy their fingerprints, but their hands don't do so well after repeated uses of that. Their hands tend to get destroyed. But Padre Pio was accused of doing the exact same thing, even by high-up people in the Vatican. And medically, had he done that, his hands would have been absolutely destroyed. But the stigmata disappeared shortly before he died because his ministry was ending. His ministry on earth was ending, and he was going to God, and they disappeared completely. And his palms and his prints were completely restored.
So their wounds, are they actively bleeding?
Yes, Padre Pio's wounds were actively bleeding. He lost about a cup of blood a day.
I've heard. I had a psychology professor years and years ago who referred to Mother Teresa as a narcissistic psychopath. So again, those views are out there if you're looking at it with the eyes of the world, if you're looking at it with the eyes of suspicion and doubt. But, there are certain saints that have just been called and given these signs and wonders. And it's not because of their own merits. It really is their, I don't know, it's grace. And it wasn't just the stigmata. He was a miracle worker on a number of different levels. I know that he could read souls, as they say. So people would go to confession with him and he would know if you were leaving something out. This was wild. I love that we'll talk about bilocation but I love how you start the book with his parents.
Yes, yeah.
I thought that was a really fun surprise because you expect to just get right into this Italian monk and how holy he must have been as a kid and why God chose him. But you rewind the tape a little bit further and start with his parents. Could you just we'll come back to Padre Pio. Could you share just a little bit about them? Because I thought it was delightful too, as a married man, trying to balance the stuff you've got to get done in the world, but also your prayer life and time with your spouse. I just thought their story was beautiful.
Thank you, Bobby. Yes, so Padre Pio's parents were Grazio and Giuseppe, and I started with their wedding because their wedding is absolutely extraordinary. So they're very, very experienced farmers. And Giuseppa is an only child, and she has more inheritance than the average person, and she's a little bit wealthier. Her family are a little bit wealthier, have a higher standing, better reputation than Grazio. But Giuseppa falls madly in love with Grazio, and Grazio falls madly in love with Giuseppa. And they get married on a Wednesday, which is important, the day of St. Joseph, which goes right throughout Padre Pio's life. All the major events happen on the day of St. Joseph. As he said, the devils weren't granted as much access to him or to his loved ones on Wednesday. And his parents get married on a Wednesday. They wear regal clothes. They would put many of the modern weddings to shame. His father wears this padded jacket with these gold buttons, and he has white stockings festooned with white ribbons. And Giuseppa wears a crimson silk dress, red, and with a bodice of gold brocade, and she has a train of bridesmaids that are dressed in equally red satin. Southern Italy, you gotta be fiery and passionate. So Grazio he's a very outgoing, charming confident man and very talkative. And he's a great storyteller. But he's about to go out to marry Giuseppa, but all around him is the banquet all ready for the guests and all the goblets of wine. He's so nervous before his wedding. He's been keeping the communion fast since midnight, but he grabs a goblet. He puts down he gets some Dutch courage by way of the wine. Goes out, marries Giuseppa, and then a few decades later, his own son said, "You need to confess that you broke your communion fast." And he'd never told anyone that he drank a bit of wine before his marriage, before his wedding. He marries Giuseppa, and they have a little boy later, Michele. Their first child is Michele, but then they bury two children. They bury Francesco, so she has a little boy called Francesco. She buries him as a little babe, and then she buries her third child, Amalia, on Valentine's Day when she's 6 months pregnant with the baby who will become Padre Pio. So she's buried two children. She has a little boy who's 5 going on 6, and she gives birth to her second St. Francis. She wasn't very young at that time. A lot of people died at the same age that Giuseppa was when she was having effectively her 4th child. She has 1 living, 2 in the cemetery, and this is her 4th. And she has such a devotion to Padre Pio that she calls this baby again Francesco. And she goes a bit further. She says, St. Francis, I've had a huge devotion to you all the time. I'm calling this little baby Francis or Francesco again. I entrust him to you. I will refuse you nothing. If you let him live, I will refuse you nothing. And he takes her exactly at her word. So all you moms out there who've maybe had difficult pregnancies, who've had miscarriage, stillbirth, maybe even if you've had that absolute harrowing pain of having to bury a child, as Giuseppa had, she had to bury 2. Entrust that child, if you want, entrust a child to a saint, and maybe even to Giuseppa, even to Padre Pio's mother, because Padre Pio said, when you're praying to Giuseppa, you'll get what you want.
I love it. It's beautiful. We have so many young parents that listen to us, and the pain of miscarriage, the pain of stillborn, of being able to conceive at all. And I know many families who have asked for Padre Pio's intercession, and so his mom. I love even like their temperaments. His dad seemed much more extrovert and gregarious, and the mom was more quiet but very active, like in the corporal works of mercy and giving food to the poor. So I love that, just as, the balance of introvert, extrovert, and how, again, starting Padre Pio's story against that backdrop of a married couple that were devoted and serving the Lord in different ways, and that was very complimentary.
Thank you so much. And actually, it's Giuseppa from whom Padre Pio really gets his character. Padre Pio is kind of a balance of both. He's extrovert and introvert. He takes from both sides very much. And he takes his brown eyes from his father, his face and his ears from Giuseppa. And he had always the photos don't show it, but Padre Pio had very dark auburn hair. And that very much is Giuseppa. And his way of speaking is exactly like Giuseppa. I mean, both are just, side by side.
He knew from early on he was called to be a priest. There was a lot of spiritual stuff happening in his youth, and felt called to the Franciscan order, and took that very, very seriously, where, in our laxity and our weakness, sometimes we're trying to cut corners, or we're trying to minimize our fasting or our prayer time, and looking for the nearest excuses. And as a dad in the working world, it's like, I have so much distractions, and who could possibly? devote that much time to prayer and yada yada yada, like excuses. But Padre Pio was a guy that, and I think that's why he also has chosen me at some level of like, hey man, you could step it up, like in his stern but gentle way.
That's very, very, very well put, Bobby. And he did know that he was called to be a priest from an early age. But Giuseppa never told him about her offering. She kept that in her heart because she was very, very discreet. And he doesn't actually know about her offering till later on, till he's a very old man. So he actually, as he used to say, I'm a mystery to myself, because
Which I love. I love that. Like for anyone thinking like, oh, the saints, they knew who they were and they had no quandaries about themselves or their internal like parts going at each other. It's to have Padre Pio say, "I am a mystery to myself." Like, awesome.
and he believes as a child that things that are happening to him are happening to every other child. And I think that the Lord allowed Padre Pio to think that things that, the devil harassing him as a baby and throughout his childhood, and also things like seeing his guardian angel and the offering he made of himself to Christ when he was 5. And he made an offering to Christ. Christ presented Christ with the Sacred Heart, appeared to Padre Pio and invited Padre Pio to give his life. And Padre Pio said, yes, I will give my life to you. He never shares this with anyone else because he thinks that, oh, this happened to absolutely everyone else around me. And maybe the Lord didn't disabuse him of this because he wanted to protect him from narcissism, from feeling that he was the special one.
He was walking in some real gifts. We've talked about the stigmata. Can you talk a little bit about bilocation and what the heck is going on there with that? Which is, again, not just a legend. We have like records to show like it happened.
And people have done depositions. People have gone under oath. And also there's physical evidence. There is physical evidence too. So he decided, if I may just dial back a second, Bobby.
Yep.
He decided to become a Franciscan when he was 10, when he sees another Franciscan with a beard. And he wanted to become a friar with a beard. He wanted a flowing beard. So he enters the Franciscans when he's 15. And he leaves his mother behind, even though she says her heart is being torn to shreds because Giuseppa has to see beloved Francesco go to the seminary at 15. He's only in the seminary 2 years, and he's only 17. And 1905, so 120 years ago, and he's praying in the chapel when suddenly, so he's in the chapel in southern Italy, when suddenly, as he said, in the click of a finger, blink of an eye, he's at the very, very top of Italy's boot, the very rim of Italy's boot, and he finds himself, lo and behold, in a palace. 17 years old, Franciscan, in his Franciscan habit, and he finds himself in a palace. And Our Lady appears beside him and says, "You are in the palace of a noble family. In that room, a man is dying. He has been a stone cutter. He has been he's been with a secret society for a long time, and he has rejected the faith for many decades. And he is saved. He is going to be saved through his wife's tears and through my intercession. Pray for him." So she gives Padre Pio this very solid instruction: pray for him. Padre Pio starts praying for him. The wife of the noble woman, the noble mother of the house. She sees a Franciscan friar, and she's wondering, why am I seeing a Franciscan friar? My husband's friends are outside the gates. So his friends, the man who's dying, his friends were outside the gates, preventing any priest from getting through, because they didn't want the man to get the last rites.
Wow.
And then he prays for him, and then Our Lady instructs Padre Pio. His wife is pregnant. She's just about to go into labor. So her husband is dying, and the woman, the mother of the house, is just about to go into labor. She's about to give birth to your first spiritual daughter, your first spiritual child of all time. This little girl is going to be a rough gem. So Our Lady tells Padre Pio, I want you to polish her. So Padre Pio is a bit flummoxed at this. He's 17 years old. He's only been 2 years in seminary, and Our Lady is telling him all these different things, and he suddenly finds himself in a palace, while he's simultaneously down in southern Italy, and everyone else around him just sees him praying in the chapel down in southern Italy, and the wife suddenly goes into labor as her husband is dying, and she gives birth to a little girl called Giovanna, and Giovanna is born on the same night that her father dies. So there's a priest outside the palace gates, and he's trying to get through, and the man's friends won't let him through. But a servant from the palace runs down and says, "A baby has just been born. You can stop the priest from going in to give the dying man, the father of the house, the last rites, but please let him come in to baptize the baby." And so the friends of the dying man relent, and they say, "Okay, let the priest in." Priest rushes in, gives the dying man the last rites, and baptizes Giovanna, who becomes Padre Pio's first spiritual child.
The first time, but not the last time, because I know this has happened with World War II pilots, where they've seen Padre Pio at work, different Italian celebrities, and so, and again, he's not announcing to the Padre Pio is not announcing to the world like, "Hey, by the way, I got these superpowers."
No, he's not. He's not announcing to the world that he has these powers. In fact, he is absolutely, that first time that he bilocated, he was absolutely flummoxed. He was absolutely bewildered as to how this was happening. So sometimes the gifts happen to him, and he's in the midst of using them while not understanding them. And then he's ordained a priest, and the bilocation continues right throughout his priesthood. And most notably, and this is how he becomes known to an American audience, is that during World War II, the absolute cataclysm of war that was World War II, his native Italy is is being torn apart by this war. And you have, when Italy joins sides, changes sides, and you have all these American soldiers and all these American pilots coming to fight the Germans, essentially, so the Germans and the Americans are fighting over Italy, and it's a bloody struggle for the boot of a country, and it's the American pilots come in, and Padre Pio joins forces in helping the Americans win, and the American pilots are flying through the sky, and Padre Pio, and this is where it gets, it becomes like the stuff of a science fiction movie, but it's too many people of all different religions saw him fly through the sky, and it's flying, and he's simultaneously bilocating, because he's on the ground in his friary doing the work of a priest, and he's simultaneously flying through the sky to guide the American pilots. And many of them became his friends. And when they went back to America, they spread the news about this holy friar. And they also told the Americans that Padre Pio wanted all Americans as his spiritual children.
I love it. I love it. I love it. But, okay, so yeah, here we are, 2025, and reflecting on Saint Therese, too. When you think about this humble religious sister had such an impact on the world, that this Italian Franciscan friar is known and beloved all the world over. But he also experienced persecution in his time period. There were a lot of people that didn't understand him. There were a lot of people that had it out for him. Could you share a little bit about that, some of the obstacles he encountered in just trying to exercise his ministry as a priest?
Well, he encountered an awful lot of jealousy from other priests, predominantly, because they're jealous of the fact that people trust Padre Pio with their money. You know, he helps an awful lot of people, and in fact, it is sometimes the people who he's led out of the worst lives. I mean, the worst and the worst sin that are most grateful to him, and they will do anything for him. And simultaneously, they have to come to his defense against priests who are attacking his ministry. I mean, the case that really, after spending 8 years, reading hundreds of books, translating from the Italian, all these different things that I've done to write the book, the case that really stands out to me is that when Padre Pio was a young priest, he became a sensation when the stigmata becomes known, and that is a real suffering for Padre Pio, because Padre Pio wanted to suffer the stigmata, but entirely in secret. And the part of his life that hurts him the most is that the stigmata are known, and he finds it an unbearable embarrassment to be compared to the Christ, by way of becoming Jesus' self-portrait. Now, Padre Pio was never divine, but our Lord gave him a replica of the wounds. And when he's in his early 30s, he's becoming very, very famous, and he attracts the attention of a priest called Padre Missio, or Don Missio. And in the book I call him Mischief Missio, because he bombards the Vatican with letters against Padre Pio. He bands together with an archbishop who is later found guilty of the most horrendous crimes, apparently, reportedly including rape. And they band together to try and have Padre Pio's ministry totally ground to a halt. And Missio goes further. He writes a book against the honor of the Forgione family. So Padre Pio's name was Forgione. And regrettably, Missio has fertile ground in that regard, because Padre Pio, not everyone in Padre Pio's family was totally good living. He has a younger sister who regrettably has problems. He had a younger sister who was very promiscuous and had other issues too, perhaps substance abuse and other things. And the Forgione family are in a bit of a bind, because Don Missio, who hates Padre Pio so much, has written this book, and they can't really sue him because maybe some of the things he's saying are true. And he goes to Padre Pio's brother and he blackmails him and says, if you give me money, I won't publish the book. And Padre Pio's brother says, okay. He's even planning to sell some of his land to pay off this bad priest. But he decides on a scheme. He decides to give Don Missio the money, but he takes down the serial numbers of the notes, goes to the police and says, look, I'm being extorted. They catch up with Missio and arrest him for blackmail. And he's in jail for what he's done. But Padre Pio is very upset that Missio is in jail, even though Missio was probably his worst enemy among the clerical class. And Missio loses his job as a teacher, but Padre Pio writes to the government and says, look, please reinstate this man as a teacher. He gets his job back, and he's forever grateful to Padre Pio. And so he goes from being Padre Pio's worst enemy to actually asking Padre Pio, may I become your spiritual son?
It's the it's too good to be true. You have that part. It's like that makes a good story, but then you see it happened, and that's the power. That's the power of John Paul II forgiving his assassin.
Yes.
That's the power of forgiveness.
Yeah, that's the power of forgiveness. And to be honest, I have to say that there's parts of it where I was led very painfully towards my own conversion, because I sometimes find it very hard to forgive someone who says something very nasty to me. I mean, I don't know how I could forgive Missio, how many countless letters, vile letters against Padre Pio, and even writing a book against his own family. Mm-hmm. How could I forgive that? And I don't know how I could forgive it. And that there's continuously throughout Padre Pio's life, he forgives and he forgives and he forgives. And Interesting that you should mention John Paul II, because John Paul II was a spiritual son of Padre Pio.
Come back to that in a moment. I just want to highlight too Padre Pio's obedience, because I remember when I first learned about him, that really always stuck out to me. Like in a time where he was so misrepresented, where he had enemies, it went up to the Vatican, people trying to slander him, and he actually wasn't allowed to celebrate Mass publicly, right? Like essentially, it's kind of like while we're supervising and investigating, just shut down his ability to kind of minister externally. And he was obedient. He didn't rally against it. He didn't say, forget this, I'm going to start my own church or I'm going to rebel. How painful that must have been. But that always stuck out to me is the fact that even if I'm being slandered and misrepresented, I'm not going to retaliate. Like there's a time to clear the air and stand up for yourself. But I just think there was such a sense of trust in Christ and that the truth is going to come out. And this hurts like hell in the short term, but I'm going to be obedient.
Yes, and it's very, very true what you're saying, Bobby, because that's what he said. He said that if the superiors told me to jump out the window, I jump out the window.
Okay, so John Paul II, talk a little bit about that. Jackie and I have a deep love for John Paul II, and yeah, all these saints, when you find out they were buddies or they knew each other, you're like, oh, sweet. It's like the Avengers.
I love it. So getting back to World War II happens in this is during the 1940s. So Italy is being bombed and the roads and the bridges are destroyed. So that means less pilgrims can come to Padre Pio, which means his pilgrims used to come en masse all the time to see Padre Pio. As you know, he was absolutely always surrounded by a sea of souls, except during World War II, because people didn't have the means to get to him. But a few intrepid souls would be able to get to him. And one soul was a young priest, very young at the time, only 27, and he was not long ordained. And he was from Poland, and he was doing further study in Rome, and he was dashingly handsome and looked like a movie star with these beautiful cornflower blue eyes. And he followed a call to go to see Padre Pio. And he went to Padre Pio as a priest, as a young priest. He knelt beside Padre Pio, and he asked Padre Pio of the stigmata. And most people only ever saw the puncture wounds on the hands, and that was when Padre Pio offered Mass. Other times he wore the brown gloves that helped with the blood, that were kind of acted as bandages on Padre Pio's stigmata because they helped with the blood. So he went to Padre Pio as this young priest, and he asks Padre Pio, what is the wound that causes you the most pain? So he's asking in the singular, like, what's the wound? And Padre Pio answers without reservation. He says, it is the shoulder wound, which no one knows about and has never been treated. Now, this may seem just that he's having an ordinary conversation. This is no ordinary conversation because the stigmata the only person who can ask and receive an answer as to the stigmata is the Pope, because it causes a lot of trouble during Padre Pio's life with people asking him all sorts of questions about the stigmata, and it's only the few who have the documentation from the Pope who can ask or examine the stigmata. Only those, except those who might find out about it by accident. You know, people who are caring for him and who have to change his bed linen and things like that. That's a separate issue. But when this young Polish priest asks him a question, Padre Pio is treating him as though he were already Pope. Because the only person who can ask without documentation is the Pope. And it would have prevented, Padre Pio could curried favor with certain very powerful people from the Vatican if he had been more open about the stigmata with them. If he had been disobedient in talking to very high profile people who came to him from the Vatican, demanding answers and prying. But he was under very strict obedience not to discuss the stigmata with anyone who did not have documentation from the Pope.
And what was John Paul II's relationship? Well, did he keep in touch with Padre Pio after that moment?
Oh yes, he did. Well, he didn't have as much opportunity in the years immediately after that, but in the 60s, then he would visit Padre Pio quite often, and then he kept up a devotion to him in the years after Padre Pio's life. John Paul II would go and pray at the tomb where Padre Pio was. He was seen very much he would make personal pilgrimages to stay a few days in San Giovanni, where Padre Pio had his ministry, to pray at the tomb.
We could go for another few hours, easy, on this Mary. I want people to read the book. I want people to be intrigued enough at this point. And so I dare ask,
Yes,
to summarize, like, what, no, I mean, yeah, it's like, what do you hope people walk away with in terms of understanding Padre Pio, or those who might be curious but are a little weirded out or even afraid? Like, sometimes we know as Catholics we don't worship the saints, we worship Christ. Yeah. The saints are the means that they point us towards him. But yeah, what would you hope people know and learn about this holy friar?
Just that you actually, just the same way that I knew nothing when he appeared to me, you don't actually need to know anything about him, and you don't even need to know much about the faith. All you need to do is ask Padre Pio, help me. Pray for me, help me. And he will come to your rescue like that, and he will help you. Especially if you're an American, and that goes very deep into his biography, why he was so grateful, and he wants to return that gift. He's very, as you may read in the book, that he's very, very grateful to Americans, and he wants to help Americans, especially if. And one thing I'd like to say is that there is a difference between how he would guide someone in religious life as opposed to how he would guide someone in the lay state. And I'm at pains to make that distinction. I was at pains to make that because sometimes he held religious people, cloistered nuns, people who were going to religious orders, he held them to a much higher standard. And he just it's not a question of making more allowances. His advice was always very tailored towards the vocation of the person. So the person, anyone out there, if you're called to religious life, and if you're even called to the cloistered life, and he also had many consecrated ladies who were his right arm, his like even one cloistered lady from America, it was said that she was his right hand. She was the right hand of Padre Pio, Mary Pyle. And if he will lead you on your personal journey, it'll be different to anyone else. You don't need to know as much about Padre Pio when you begin, because you will go in routes that are very unique to you.
And he's not bound by time or space. So he's
not bound by time or space.
Ever taking more and more spiritual children under his arm.
And one thing, if I may, is that when you pray to him, you may receive a celestial scent. It happens very, very frequently.
What is that?
Well, a number of people when they pray to him, they get a certain celestial scent that comes from heaven and indicates his presence, his intercession, or a special message he may give you. Most commonly, it's the smell of roses and violets, either roses or violets or a mix of the two, and simultaneously that's the smell of the stigmata. He used to smell of the stigmata, and even a little girl came to Padre Pio and she said, "You must lie among the roses." And it's just, if I may, we could go. I know we could go on about this for hours, but when you meet Padre Pio, you're simultaneously meeting a huge number of friends in heaven. And we've talked predominantly the thread that goes through this conversation, I think, Bobby, is the bilocation. And we'll return a moment to Saint Therese of Lisieux. I'll just get her little portrait here. Yeah, I have it pinned up here on it's my washing line of saints.
Love it.
I can change them. They kind of washed over me. I can change them because I pinned them up with the pegs. But this is Saint Therese of Lisieux. And Padre Pio had a profound devotion to her. And he even said that she was a great, great saint. And I know that your Jackie has a fantastic devotion to Saint Therese and to her sister.
Yeah, and we named our daughter after her mother, Zélie.
The little redhead, your little redhead.
Oh yes, our little redhead.
Yes, because I listen to your.
The Irish temper runs strong in her.
I know. Someone even cracked that I could be the spokesmodel for Lucky Charms.
Ew.
I haven't taken them up on that offer yet, but I know what it's like to be a redhead, or a very dark redhead at least. But yours, Ellie, is a bright redhead.
Oh yeah, and spunky and a philosopher, and she'll be holy for sure. She already is in so many ways. But Saint Therese.
So yours, Ellie, is called after this lady's mother, and it was Saint Therese of Lisieux. And Padre Pio said that she was a saint, a great saint. And he says that he even said in his letters that we just need to abandon ourselves to the Christ child, just like Saint Therese does. That's what he says in his letters. I can give you all these complex advice, but abandon yourselves as Saint Therese. She was a French nun, and so to go back to bilocation, he bilocated to her canonization.
Stop.
He was seen in St. Peter's by many people in 1925. And as we know, things were very, very difficult for him in 1925. Going back to it, he was being persecuted by those priests. But he bilocated to her canonization. So when you're meeting Padre Pio, you're meeting a host of different wonder workers.
Yeah, who are all, again, aligned to get us closer to Christ at the end of the day. Padre Pio and You, an epic story of spiritual fatherhood. Mary, thank you so much for your time to break this all down. Where can people find the book, and where can people follow you and learn more about your work?
Thank you. Sophia Institute Press, Sophia Press, have done me the great, great, great honor of publishing my book. And it was actually my friend Patrick O'Hearn. Anyone check out his books? Patrick O'Hearn's books are just absolutely fantastic. I can't say enough about them, especially if you're a parent. Patrick is a father of 2 children, and he's written a lot of children's books. So Patrick O'Hearn helped me an awful lot when I was. He was a mentor to me, and he helped me get published even when I'd never ever thought I'd be good enough for Sophia Press. It didn't even cross my mind. Go to the Sophia Press website, and you may buy it there.
And are you still writing? Do you still have your blog up?
Oh yes, still the blog up. Did the most recent post 2 days ago. So if you want to check out Mary's blog or the Path Less Taken, and I just call it Mary's blog, and I've got recent posts up, and I'm hoping to do more blogging. Usually I used to do about maybe 120 blogs. In the recent years, that's gone down because every night I was checking Italian sources for, what witnessed to this bilocation, who saw him simultaneously in 2 places. All this sort of stuff was keeping me up off until bedtime every night. So blogging went by the wayside in recent years because I had to rewrite the book 3 times. Every time a new detail would come in and a new perspective, and I'd say, "Oh, Mary, you've got that wrong." I would get a lot of things wrong, and I'd have to go back and correct them and everything else. So the blog is up, Mary's blog, and I'm also on Instagram.
We will link everything below. Mary, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure for me too.
Thank you all for listening and for watching. Thank you for our Patreon subscribers who are keeping the lights on and the show going. From all of us, well, from Jackie and I, God bless. Till next time.